is the LNP member for Callide and joins me this morning. Good morning.
Yeah, good morning, Paul.
What have you made of the last 2 days of hearings?
Well, I've been down here in Brisbane, obviously, at the federal government Senate inquiry into the state government's Reef regulations. It has been quite some revelations been revealed. The fact is that the science that is used to underpin this Reef regulation bill is flawed and it is untested.
How is it flawed?
Well, much of the data is incomplete. The scientists that were before the Senate committee yesterday admitted that. They admitted that only 3% of the Great Barrier Reef has been studied. There is no data from 2005 to 15 on coral cover on the reef, and there are many of these anecdotes that have come out in the inquiries over the last couple of days.
Sure. The anecdotes as opposed to data. So I'm interested because the Queensland government in 2017 published their scientific consensus on the Great Barrier Reef and the impacts on it. They talked about the decline of marine water quality owing to pollutants from farming, water quality having a massive impact from what's going on there. All sorts of points there from the scientific consensus. Do you disagree with what they published there?
Well, again, in the Senate hearings yesterday, that whole 2017 scientific consensus statement has become a farce. The peer review exercise they conducted on it is just absolute nonsense. They've paid their own people to peer review it. Of the 4 peer reviewers, 2 of them weren't even scientists. So how can this be a credible document when they're actually fudging all the information?
All right. What's happening here? What's your explanation for what you see as flaws in the science?
Well, what you've got to understand is that the ramifications of this bill. Every grazier, every farmer, anybody who has anything to do with agriculture who is based on the eastern fall of the Great Dividing Range will be affected by these regulations that the government has brought in. They will be significant money spent for anybody to try and meet what is considered as best management practice, which brings up the question of who is going to decide exactly what best management practice is, and this is why it all turns into a dog's breakfast.
What is the right way to manage water runoff from farms and their impact on the reef?
Farmers and graziers are already doing that, and that is the whole point. Farmers and graziers are the best environmentalists that are the stewards and owners and managers of the land. And this has not been recognised by the government nor by the people, the scientists that write up these scientific consensus statements. And that has become clearly evident. Nobody is arguing one little bit that we should not be mindful of how we use our land and how we use chemicals and nutrients and all of those sorts of things. But to vilify farmers as environmental vandals, the very people who provide food for Australia, is absolute nonsense, and it is driven by ideological politics, not science, and it is not based on good scientific outcomes for the Great Barrier Reef.
Right. How do you design a framework so that you make sure that farmers are doing the right thing?
Well, that is a thing that has been going on for many years. AgForce, for an example, has been involved in collecting data on best management practice for many years. They have been put in a position of deleting all of that data because of the Privacy Act and the fact that if they released that data to the government, that they would expose themselves to litigation if that was the case. So they're between a rock and a hard place. That has now allowed the government to argue that there is no best management practice in place, which is absolute nonsense.
Right. But if AgForce isn't able to do it, then does it fall to the government to introduce some kind of system here?
the whole point is it is already happening. That, as I said, the farmers and graziers who are the custodians of the land, who live on there and manage it, are the best environmentalists we have when it comes to looking after their land.
Yeah, but
it is not in a farmer or a grazier's best interest to degrade his land.
Sure, but I suppose the question is, how can we have certainty that that's happening? It's all very well if it is happening. How can we have confidence that it is?
Well, all they have to do is go out and engage the farming and grazing community and see exactly what's happening on the ground. And this has not been the case with this science and scientific reef statement that's underpinning this bill that the government's put through last year.
Okay. Isn't that the whole point of the legislation, to provide a framework to engage and find out what is happening on our agricultural land?
I suppose if you want to argue that, you can, but the point is it's not happening.
You're obviously in these hearings over the last few days. I mean, what's your sense of? We can't presuppose what the Senate inquiry will find, but what's your sense of, I suppose, which way the wind is going, as it were?
Well, I hope that this will gain momentum. Obviously, the Federal Senate inquiry, they will write up a report on what has happened over the last couple of days and write a report on their findings. That will be tabled in Federal Parliament, but the Federal Senate is not in a position to be able to change Queensland law.
Do you think there is a role for the government here? I mean, to go back to what was published in the scientific consensus, that does say there is a need for a mechanism for ongoing evaluation of reef quality program to inform future program design. That's a line in the scientific consensus. Does the Queensland government have a role to play here?
Oh, absolutely, but the whole point, what we're asking for here, is that the science be tested properly, it must be replicated, and there must be an institution put in place that checks the science that is being used to underpin these bills, to make sure that it is credible science that is not driven by political ideology.
If indeed there's a world in which we get science, that you agree to the methodology of, and I suppose agree to the methodology of beforehand, and it still comes back and you don't like the results, are you happy to accept it?
Provided it has been tested and can be replicated, and it's been under proper peer review. And in this case, with the scientific consensus reef statement, that is clearly not the case. Recently, we have seen people like Dr. Michael Mann, who's come up with the famous temperature hockey stick graph, who's written many scientific papers for the IPC, found a fraud in the courts in America. We've seen Dr. Michael Schillenberger offer a worldwide apology for his views on this extreme environmental opinions. We've seen Dr. Michael Moore, with his Planet of the Humans video that exposes people like Al Gore and the whole renewable energy thing as an absolute rip-off farce that is the world's biggest con job.
I'm sorry, renewable energy is a farce?
Absolutely. Renewable energy is not renewable. The sunshine and the wind is renewable, but wind farms and solar panels, etc., are certainly not renewable. You have to replace them 10, 15 years all the time if you want to keep them producing. And the whole point to that is that you need things like coal to produce steel. You need coal to produce the silicon that goes into a solar panel.
All right.
Anybody who believes that renewable energy is renewable is got the wool pulled over their eyes.
All right. I think our conversation about Australia's energy transition might be a larger conversation for another time, so we'll leave it to that for now, Colin Boyce, but I appreciate your time today.
Thank you so much, Paul.
Colin Boyce, LNP member for Callide. You can have your say to 1300 837 222. If you want to give me a call, you can text to 0487 993 222.